Good morning, Year 11. So we're continuing with our Paper 2 Question 2 from Wednesday now. So how many marks is Paper 2 Question 2 worth? What will this question ask you to do, and which skill is this question assessing, please? So just as a reminder then, this is how the question will look for Paper 2 Question 2. So it's asking you to select and synthesize evidence from different texts. Okay, it's a comparison question, so it's asking you to refer to both source A and source B. Both sources are about different institutions and the people in them. Use details from both sources to write a summary of the differences. It's worth 8 marks, so you should spend around 8 to 10 minutes on it. And the idea is that you're able to find information and infer the meaning from that information. So what does it suggest to you about the people in the prisons and the prisons themselves? So last lesson you should have had a look through source A, so this lesson we're going to have a look at source B, okay? So obviously they're both about prisons, however they're both looking at very different versions of prisons. They're also written during different time periods, so the first one you looked at was the 19th century, this one is from the 20th century. So I just want you to spend 10 minutes on your own reading through the extract. So what do you learn about the institution and what do you learn about the people who are in this institution? Now it will help if you can go back to yesterday's lesson Wednesday's lessons first and have a read back through part A and source A so that you can see what you'd picked out of there, because remember this is a comparison question, so you kind of want to be talking about similar details when you're thinking about comparing them. So 10 minutes to have a go at reading through this on your own. So once you've read the two sources then you're in a good position to start thinking about how they respond to the question. So you have then got to identify the similarities between the overlaps. Now obviously it doesn't mean similarities as in they're both going to think about things in the same way. It means similarities where they're talking about a similar topic. So for instance, I've picked out about the idea that they're both written from a perspective, okay? So they're both written, somebody has obviously looked at these prisons and written these ideas. Now, if we look to source A, we see that this one is from the setting, is from the perspective of someone who has been in prison. So we know that because he says, I remember once in Reading prison, as I was going out to exercise, seeing in the dim lit cell opposite my own a small boy. So the fact that this person has been in prison is instantly making me think that, you know, their experience is more realistic. It's more of an accurate representation as to what life as a prisoner is like. Whereas in comparison to source B, it's written from the perspective of someone who's never been in prison, and they're just doing like a newspaper article on what this new prison is going to be like. And obviously we know that from the way that it, you know, is very factual in the way that it talks about the prison. So when it opens next month, so we know obviously that it's not open yet, and therefore it's not kind of a fully kind of working prison as there is in the first text. So that's what I mean by overlaps. So they're both written from a perspective. However, they both are from different perspectives. So even though they're both talking about prisons, they're both talking about, you know, these experiences of being in a prison. One is a more accurate representation than the other. So what I'd like you to spend some time doing now is going back through both sources and having a think about where you could create a kind of comparison like this. So I'd like you to aim to find 3. I'm happy for you to use this one as 1, so you've only got to find 2 more. So you've essentially got to think about the prison itself, so what is the comparison between these two prisons, and then the people, so what's the comparison about the people who are in these prisons, okay? Give yourself 10 minutes to have a go at that. On the next slide you'll find both of the extracts next to each other so you can have a look at them together. So you've got to find the overlaps for me. It would have been nice for you to actually, you know, have a go at this and think about the comparisons yourself. However, I know it is difficult when you've not got a member of staff there to support you in asking you the right sort of questions. So what I've created here is a little table that's going to help you to, you know, produce a response. So I've actually picked out the overlaps, okay? So my first one is about perspective, my second one is about the people in the prison, and then my third one is about the institution itself. So what you need to do now, rather than having to think about your own overlaps, obviously this is a help slide, is I'd like you to go and find a quotation from the sources for each of these ideas, okay? So for example, for source A, you need to find a quotation that tells me that this is from the perspective of a former inmate, which I already showed you on the previous slide, so you know you haven't got to do too much work. That source A is about the imprisonment of children, so can you find a quotation that is going to talk about the imprisonment of children? And that this institution is set on terrorising children, can you find a quotation to prove that? Then in source B, again, I've already shown you a quotation that proves that this is from an outsider's perspective, that this one is about the imprisonment of actual criminals instead of children, and that the second institution also wants to inflict fear on its inmates, but perhaps, you know, inflicting fear on fully grown adults is quite different to terrorising children, isn't it? So see if you can find a quotation for each of these. So you should have 4 quotations at least, and the other 2 are on a previous slide, so you're going to have to go back and find them, okay? And you do need these quotations because you are going to write an answer for me in your next lesson. So once you've done that, make sure you copy this grid out, make sure you put the quotations in, then that is the end of this lesson. Remember to do the Show My Homework quiz as well. Thank you.